All right. We're going to bring our last innovator up, customer success solution. Let's bring Kristen Hayer, founder and CEO of the Success League, up onto the stage.
Hi, everybody. I realize that I am standing between all of you and really super fun mountain activities. So I will try to keep this brief, but make it powerful so you get a return on your investment of time. What I want to talk about today is really how to anticipate your customers' needs. And I think this is really important. We talk a lot about being proactive in customer success, but we don't always talk about how you can really get further than that and anticipate your customers' needs. So that's what my presentation is about. And I have a couple of stories to tell you. Before I do that, I want to just ask, has anyone had a really horrible airline experience? All of you. I would have expected that. Has anyone had their baggage lost? Most of you. Anybody had a flight that was severely delayed? Yeah. Has anyone had a flight that was canceled and then been rebooked on a flight the next morning and then been put up at a very scary hotel in Atlanta that had police and a blood stain on the carpet? That was me. I can tell you more about that one later if you want, but I want to tell you about a great story about an airline. So it started actually 4 weeks ago. I was headed to Chicago to meet with a customer, and my flight was scheduled for about 10 o'clock in the morning. And so I was excited because I had time to go walking in the morning, and I'm out on my walk, and I'm about 1.5 miles away from my house, and I get a little text alert from Delta that says, your flight's been delayed 2 hours. And I'm like, it's a connecting flight. I'm gonna miss my connection. And then my second thought was, this is gonna be such a pain to fix. And so I start immediately trucking back to the house, got back to the house, I checked the Delta app, and before even the regular screen popped up on my Delta app, there was a list of all the different flights that I could take to get to Chicago that day. And I'm like, oh, this is great, this is easy. So, and it had a very clear message on it that said, you're not gonna get charged for this. I'm like, awesome. So I picked the flight that worked best for me. The downside of the flight I picked was that it was a much shorter timeline for getting to the airport. And I really hadn't finished packing the night before because I thought I had all this time in the morning. And so I packed really fast, got myself cleaned up, hopped in a Lyft, and now I'm stressing about how am I gonna get through security on time. And so I'm looking at the Delta app on my way to the airport, and I notice there's a little red thing on there that says priority security. I'm like, amazing. I'm like, I don't even have to mess around with this. I can just go straight through the expedited security line, and I can get right to my flight. So I did that. It was amazing. I didn't have to ask for it or anything. And then, I got there with about 15 minutes to spare, which was great. I usually am one of those people that loves to get to the airport really early. So this was a little stressful for me still, but I made it. And I'm checking in for the flight, and I get up to the front and I scan my phone, and this little piece of paper pops out. I'm like, oh, and the person that's standing there grabs it and she goes, oh, it looks like you've been upgraded. I'm like, this is incredible. And so I go and I look and I sit down in my seat, and I had every traveler's dream. I had Comfort Plus seat, and I had an empty seat in between me and the next passenger. It's like the dream. And so that was my first flight, and on my second flight of the day, I was upgraded to first class. So they turned what was going to be a really crappy day for me into an amazing customer experience by anticipating the needs. And one thing I want to call out about that is that I didn't have to talk to a single person for that to be accomplished. I just went through doing what I was doing as a customer, and all of those things happened. Now, I will admit, I travel a lot, and I have silver medallion status, so that may have played into that a little bit. But I want to talk about how this relates to all of you. So you guys don't work for airline. Does anyone work for an airline here? No. Okay, you all work for tech companies, right? So how does this relate to a tech company? We can still anticipate our customers' needs. And I want to take you through an example that I have of one of the customers that we worked with at the Success League. And I think that the challenge that they were facing is one that many of you face, which is that their churn was a lot higher than it needed to be, and it didn't really fit with the business model that they had. So they had to figure out how to correct that. I want to give you a little bit of background on their company. This is a company that is a SaaS solution, and there's 3 things that I really want to call out about this company. The first one is that they are in a highly competitive space. They sell to managed service providers. There are a lot of managed service providers in the world. A lot of them are very small organizations that maybe have 1 or 2 people working for them. And so they have to be very competitive because there's a lot of other vendors that serve that space. And one of the big competitive advantages that they have is that their customer service and customer success can be really high. It wasn't quite where it needed to be. And so that was the challenge that we worked with them on. The other thing I want to call out is that their annual recurring revenue really low on average per customer, which means that their business model did not support a high-touch customer success program. They had to have a low-touch / tech touch program. And so that's an important thing for you to keep in mind as I go through this example. And finally, they really needed heavy automation because they have a global presence. They have customers all over the world. And so in order for those customers to get served by the organization, there needs to be automation in place so that they can self-serve the tools and resources that they need when they need it, instead of relying on a staff of people to be there all the time for every time zone in the world. So that's the situation we were dealing with. So I want to talk about how my Delta example of how you create an exceptional customer experience ties to the work that we did with this client. First of all, we really tried to anticipate the what. In my Delta example, the what was making sure that I got on a flight that got me to Chicago on time. And they knew a few things about me that helped them give me good options. They knew that I was a Silver Medallion member, so I travel quite a bit. They also knew from looking at information about me and when I travel that I usually leave on a Monday and I usually come home on a Thursday or a Friday, which pegs me as a business traveler. Business travelers need to get where they're going when they want to get there because they usually have meetings on the other end. So they knew those 2 things about me, and that enabled them to present me with a list of options that worked for me. Translating this into the work that we did with our SaaS customer, they had a lot of clients who were churning, but when we looked into the data on it, what we found is that they had a lot of clients that were churning early. So by early, I mean churning within the first 1 or 2 months of signing up for the service, which is a huge problem. And when we dug into that a little bit more, what we found is that they were churning because the onboarding experience really wasn't that great. And so clients needed better information on how to get started. So instead of focusing on all churn or the entire customer journey, we zeroed in onto the thing that would make the most difference for the most customers, and that was our what. I think it's really important as you are thinking about how to anticipate your customers' needs, that you think about the few things that are going to make the biggest difference right off the bat. It can be very easy as a customer success leader to get really bogged down in all the stuff that we know we need to do. You guys are going to leave this conference and you're going to have a list of like 30 to 50 things that you're like, oh yeah, I got to do that and I got to do that. There's so many great speakers here and they have great ideas. So it's going to be up to you to go home and figure out what are the things that are going to mean the most to your clients and work on those. So that was the what. Then we really worked on anticipating the when. Back to my Delta example, the when on the Delta example was really getting me through security quickly. That was important. And they could tell that my flight was booked within 2 hours. I needed to be at the airport within 2 hours of when I booked that flight. And so I've had flights that have been delayed before and I've never gotten that security clearance before. But somehow they knew that this was a short-term thing and I needed to get there quickly. So they gave me that without me having to ask. That was a big win. So when we were working with our SaaS client, we thought about the win. How could we make sure that their customers got what they needed before they even asked for it and before they really needed it? And one of the approaches that we took on this was to go back and look at the support tickets that had been submitted by customers during their first couple of months. And looking at when, week by week and day by day, they were asking for common things. So we could kind of say, okay, a typical customer is going to need things at these key points, as they're onboarding. And that enabled us to come up with a timeline that was a lot more effective than the one that they already had in place. So it created our timeline. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. One of the things that I think is common, and a lot of you probably run into this, is that customers need reports from your system. And they usually need it around the end of the month because, as all of you know, we all have to give reports to our bosses at the end of the month about what happened the prior month, and it usually happens on some kind of monthly cadence, and your customers are in the same boat. So one of the things that you can do to anticipate your customers' needs is get them information up front about how to run your reporting tools before they ask you for it, because you know it's going to happen probably sometime toward the end of the first 30 days. So that's one example. I think the thing that I want you to take away from this is it's really important to think about timing. You want to try to anticipate your customers' needs. And the more tools you get in place, the more you can start to do this in an automated way, and that's great. But it still involves you really putting yourself in your customer's shoes and thinking about what they need when. Delta did that for me. They got me through security quickly. We started doing this with our clients' customers and getting them the information they needed before they really needed it. So finally, I want to talk about how you anticipate the how. This is the most important part. I was fine once I got through security. It would have been a perfectly normal, reasonable flight experience if I didn't get upgraded. I would have been cool with that. I still got on a plane. I still got to Chicago. But they made the experience great by thinking about how I would feel if, having gone through what I went through that morning, I got an upgrade on my flight. And again, they took care of that without me having to ask or complain or do anything. And so I think that's a great example of how the how of what we do things really matters to people. Creating that delight is important. And so when we were thinking about this with our SaaS customer, we knew they had a lot of the pieces they needed for this onboarding program, but they weren't all in a format that was appropriate for the content that was being delivered. And so, most of it, frankly, and I think a lot of us probably do this, a lot of the information goes out in text over email because that's what you have systems to do. A lot of content, especially content for companies that are coming on board with you, it's better delivered as a video or as a audio recording or as a webinar that you bring a bunch of people to. So there's a lot of different tools that you can employ, but you really have to think about each piece of content and deliver it in a way that's going to convey the message in the best way and also delight your customer. It's a lot more interesting to be onboarded with a fun video that teaches you what you need to know than a big email that you have to read through the text of or an article from your knowledge base. So you can be thinking about how you deliver things too. I want to kind of go back to my Delta example. The how was the upgrade for me there. For this customer, the how was creating a suite of onboarding materials that was not only delivered when they needed it, before they ever asked for it, but in a way that was engaging and educational. So I think it's important to think about the what, the when, and the how when you're trying to anticipate customers' needs. I want to just share some results with you really quickly. This customer saw a 33% reduction in their churn within 3 months. And they saw a 50% reduction in early churn. So they were able to really lower the early churn that they were facing. Their adoption got much faster, especially of the features that made them very sticky. And then finally, they started getting positive feedback from customers. And that's really important because you know that customers don't usually proactively reach out to you with positive feedback. It's usually negative feedback. So when customers do reach out with positive feedback, it's important. And in a very competitive space like theirs, it was absolutely critical. And it was a great indication that they were making really good strides with their client base. So what was the result that Delta got from giving me a great experience? Well, I'm standing in front of all of you, and I just shared this with all of you. And a couple of weeks ago, I shared this on Facebook with all of my family and friends. And I shared it on LinkedIn with several thousand people. And everybody knows about the great experience that I had with Delta. So I'll put it to you, what is that worth? And that's it for me. I want to let you know we have a booth outside. I would love to talk to any of you. And I hope you have a lot of fun this afternoon here at Sundance.
All right. Thank you.